The Korean War ended in 1953, but tensions between North and South Korea have remained high even into modern times, with North Korean missile tests frequently appearing in the news today. 1976 was no different. On August 18, 1976, a group of 5 Korean Service Corps, or KSC, troops were escorted by a United Nations security team into the Joint Security Area of the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. The Joint Security Area, abbreviated as JSA, is the only place where North and South Korean troops stand face to face. It's probably what most people envision whenever they think of the Korean DMZ. The JSA is an area used by the North and South for diplomatic talks, and at the time in 1976 it was also used for military negotiations. The Korean Service Corps troops were escorted into the area to cut down a 98-foot-tall poplar tree, as it blocked the line of sight between a United Nations command checkpoint and an observation post. After the troops began trimming the tree, about 15 North Korean soldiers appeared, commanded by Senior Lieutenant Pak Chul, whom had been nicknamed Lieutenant Bulldog due to his history of confrontations. For about 15 minutes, Pak and his troops observed the trimming of the tree without concern. He then abruptly told the Korean Service Corps troops to stop pruning the tree. Captain Boniface of the United Nations Command ordered the KSC troops to continue trimming the tree against Pak's wishes. Upset that he had been ignored, Pak sent a soldier back into North Korean territory to call for help. Soon after, a North Korean guard truck appeared, and about 20 soldiers exited the truck with crowbars and clubs. Pak once again called for the trimming of the tree to come to a halt. Boniface once again ignored him and turned his back on the North Korean troops. At this point, Pak commanded his troops to attack. Pak himself knocked Captain Boniface to the ground, and at least 5 North Korean soldiers proceeded to beat him to death. Lieutenant Mark Barrett jumped over a low wall during the fight, and the South Korean troops lost sight of him. The United Nations forces noticed that one North Korean guard would take an axe and go to the other side of a nearby low wall, then return a few minutes later. And he would hand the axe to another guard who would repeat the same action. This went on for about 90 minutes before United Nations guards were informed that Lieutenant Barrett was missing, and they promptly sent out a search and rescue party to find him. In the same place, the North Korean guards were observed disappearing behind the wall with an axe. Barrett was rushed to a nearby hospital, but died from the wounds inflicted by the North Korean guards on the way. In response to the death of the 2 Americans, the United Nations Command determined that instead of simply trimming the tree as originally planned, they would cut down the tree with the use of overwhelming force. Care and consideration were taken to ensure that the operation, named Operation Paul Bunyan, would not escalate tensions between North and South Korea. On August 21st, at 7 a.m., a convoy of 23 American and South Korean vehicles entered the JSA without warning North Korea. The North only had 1 manned guard post at this hour as well, so there were few North Korean guards in the area at the time. Among the UN and South Korean forces were 2 8-man teams of military engineers with chainsaws, who were instructed to cut down the tree. These engineer teams were guarded by 2 30-man security platoons armed with pistols and hand axes. The first security platoon secured the northern entrance to the area through a bridge, while the other secured the southern edge of the area around the tree. There were also explosives planted on a nearby bridge, named the Freedom Bridge, in case the situation escalated. There was also a 165mm gun from an M728 combat engineer vehicle aimed at the bridge to ensure its destruction if necessary. There was also a company of soldiers building rafts on a nearby river in case they needed to evacuate through that route. Accompanying the engineers tasked with cutting down the trees were 64 men of the South Korean 1st Special Brigade who were armed with clubs and trained in Taekwondo, and they supposedly did not have firearms. However, once they parked their trucks, they began deploying sandbags, and then handed out M16 rifles and M79 grenade launchers, which were concealed beneath the sandbags in their trucks. Several of them also had M18 Claymore mines strapped to their chests with a detonator in their hand, and were taunting the North Koreans to cross the bridge where the South could fire upon them. Behind them were U.S. infantry loaded in 20 utility helicopters and 7 Cobra attack helicopters. Behind these helicopters were B-52 Stratofortresses escorted by U.S. F-4 Phantom IIs, as well as South Korean F-5 and F-86 fighter jets. F-4C and F-4D Phantom jets were also deployed, and the aircraft carrier USS Midway was stationed just offshore from the border. Near the edges of the DMZ were many more U.S. and South Korean infantry, artillery, air defense, and armor ready to defend the area if things escalated. In total, this task force consisted of 813 men. the engineers left their vehicles and quickly began cutting down the tree. The troops in the area moved to their assigned locations and guarded the engineers. North Korea quickly responded by deploying between 150 to 200 troops, armed with machine guns and assault rifles, who arrived in buses but did not leave them at first and watched things unfold. The North Koreans eventually left their buses and began setting up machine gun positions from which they watched as the tree was felled in about 42 minutes. A 20-foot tall stump was intentionally left standing as a reminder of the incident. In response, Kim Il-sung, leader of North Korea at the time, sent a message to the United Nations Command later that day, expressing regret at the axe murder incident that had occurred 3 days prior.